A new season brought forth by a new year. What new dangers, what new knowledges, what discoveries, and what stories will we uncover? For all of these and more can be found here at the Lair of OmnusI in this, our third season. Hello friends, I am OmnusI here with a quick video response to my friend Robert the Narrator on his channel Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. Robert just put up a video saying something like, to the effect of, if you don't like Murderhoboes in your party, then it's your fault. And it's an interesting article. I think game masters who post things based on their personal frustrations can really give us a good raw experience on how a person's needs and desires can really influence what's going on at their gaming table. And in my personal case, I completely understand where Robert's coming from. I myself have players at my everyday gaming table that don't necessarily play the style that I prefer. And, you know, when I brought this disparity up, basically the understanding that I have now is that I can't change my friends and what they're comfortable with, and I really don't know that I have the right to demand that they do so. Now, the perspective that Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master put out is, basically, if you have Murderhoboes, that is, people who don't have any attachments, they go through a game as violently as possible, killing anybody that's an obstacle, and have, you know, no concept of the value of life, just slaughter their way through problems, problem solved if there's nobody left alive to complain. This has been disparaged by a lot of people as a poor way of playing, but really understanding the Murderhobo is kind of essential in this. And realistically, where that mindset came from originally comes from where role-playing games started. The idea was that your dungeon master or game master had a dungeon, and you would go into it, you would attack the dungeon, you would go in, kill the monsters, take their treasure, and leave. Violence was the order of the day. Yes, there were occasionally puzzles you'd have to think your way through. There were traps that perhaps you could disarm with clever thought. But generally, combat encounters were designed to be combative. You use violence to solve the problem. And after all, so many of the characters' abilities in many role-playing games are combat-related, and you want to use what your character is good at, right? So violence is kind of inherent in some groups and some players' mindsets. The idea of hoboing, meaning that you go from site to site with no attachments holding you in place and no consequences for your actions, because you don't care, you won't be in any place long enough for your misdeeds to catch up to you. A lot of that stems from many people early on using modules for their adventures, meaning that they go to a place, there's a problem, they fix the problem, they get the adventure rewards and whatever, and move on. There's always another place that needs heroes to kill something to solve a problem. And so many of the modules were basically resolved through combat. There is a big bad evil guy who's causing the problem. You find out who the big bad evil guy is, hack through their defenses, and solve the problem. That's what a lot of modules amounted to. Some of them required more cleverness than others, but generally that was the satisfying conclusion they all wanted to come to. Find the bad guy, kill it, move on. These days, there's a big difference between more modern role-playing games built on narrative and emphasizing role-playing than there was in those old-style games where, again, if you wrote a backstory, it wasn't anything that was generally held against you, it didn't give you any bonuses, it was just something to justify whatever choices you make for your character. And nowadays, there's an emphasis on having backstory and goals and things that tie your character down, so that the hoboing thing isn't quite as important. You have things for your characters to care about, and solving problems through extreme violence in a more realistic narrative world are generally going to be punished by, well, laws and people who want to enforce those laws. So, again, modern players are generally less inclined to be murder hobos. But there are still people that are in a game, that's how they deal with a problem. And in some small regards, I will actually agree with Robert's position that murder hobos are sometimes the fault of the game master. If you allow every problem to be solved through violence, the players will go to the easiest solution, which is violence. If you pose problems, especially if you get players who are in their early stages of development, and you pose problems that can't be solved with violence, that they learn to understand that violence can't solve everything and often isn't the best way of solving things, then, well, yeah, you kind of deserve that. You have taught them how to murder hobo their way through things. And quite honestly, the trend of making edgy characters that have as few ties as possible, holding them back, is not a new thing. It's really not, but, you know, oh, my parents are all dead. They died in a fire that was set by my enemy. And then I killed my enemy. And now I'm just wandering, selling my sword to the highest bidder, living in my cold, dark angst. Yeah, you have no attachments, nothing interesting about your character, nothing holding you down. Classic murder hobo. Classic edgelord murder hobo. That is, again, some people like that because it removes your weaknesses. It means that there's nothing the GM can pull strings on to make you do what they want you to do. It also means there's nothing that's really going to excite you one way or the other unless whatever you're interested in happens to involve whatever that thing is. So it makes the Game Master's job much harder if your characters are devoid of any kind of attachments. If you allow your player characters, say, not requiring a session 0, so you can explain the world, explain the situation, and give the players something to be excited about attaching themselves to, if you don't do something like that, that's kind of on you a little bit then, isn't it? You've turned in a 6-page backstory where you explain how you are an orphan and this just justifies all the skills you have and has no real attachments because after you learned everything, the people behind you all died or have no strong attachment, just kind of drifted through your life. You know, you're a henchman. You are a hireling. You have no great impact on the story that I've developed unless I make it happen through the story. Now, I have no problem with people who develop their backstory as they play. I don't. It's just a convenience and a nod of respect to the Game Master when you give them some things that they can work into the story to, again, try to tie your character's interests in, so there's a good reason why you're involved in the events of the game. And if the game is just randomly going from dungeon to dungeon, then murder hobing really isn't that much of an issue. It's kind of the order of the day. So, now, again, part of the premise of Robert's video is that, hey, if you're playing with people who prefer to murder hobo their way through a campaign, then you're the problem because you choose to play in a system that you don't like the results of. You don't like their style of play, so it's on you, really. You're in the wrong group. Now, I've had those kind of aha moments before. Playing in an Exalted game, I was playing a straight arrow, I will lead by example, paladin-like character in a game that I wasn't compelled to play a paladin character, but I wanted to play somebody that good. Somebody who people could rally around and see a better world around me. His name was Dawnstrider, and he was awesome. Everybody else in the group was a heedless reprobate. We actually had one person who was playing an Abyssal Exalted, one of the dark death exalted. And he was working against us, trying to corrupt everybody, and everybody else was gleefully going with that corruption. Oh, yes. We had a sorcerer who regularly just shredded people, and all he lived to do was burn and destroy. That's all he cared about, was doing as much damage as possible. He didn't stand for anything. The other person in our group, I can't even remember the personality because he didn't stand for anything. And we had one person who was kind of outside of my character, the moral compass of the group. He was a decent enough guy, but he had no spine. He'd go along with whatever everybody else wanted to do. So it was, if my character wasn't leading the group because I was trying to do the good thing that the others were tearing down behind me, we didn't go anywhere. Finally, I realized, wait a minute, I'm really dissatisfied because my group doesn't work with me. I'm the bad guy. I'm the person who's playing against everybody else's style. So I had that character walk off, and I played a guy who was a rock star, hedonistic, woo, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, yeah! And the fact that he's a Solar Exalted meant that he had, you know, godlike levels to entertain and inspire, but he didn't, because he was just, you know, a hedonistic, you know, just used his powers to lazily drift through society, and ended up killing a lot of people, summoning them in for a big rock concert in the middle of what was really a pandemic. That was a bad idea. My character wasn't that bright, didn't think about it. The campaign fell apart because we had no direction, but my character fit in better with the rest of the group, and yeah, the campaign probably would have lasted longer had I kept playing Dawnstrider, but I would have been miserable because the whole time I'm playing against what everybody else is. And the most experienced person in the game was playing the Abyssal. He was playing my antithesis that was in the same group. And because I didn't know any better, there were plenty of signs had I had any experience in the game, but because I didn't know any better, it didn't matter. So I took myself out of that situation, changed my style up, played somebody who I wasn't thrilled with, I wasn't extremely excited to play, but I thought would fit better with the rest of the group, and the group dissolved as a result. So changing your style clearly isn't always the solution, but I will say a few things about this. Number one, most people, I keep hearing about this online all the time. People don't have the luxury of playing with their best friends who have exactly the same tastes and choices that they have. You will often have people who come to the table who, they're the people who are available. Now, this is especially the case in terms of pickup games in a public site or a convention where people bought a ticket to your table, so they're going to play. You don't have the luxury of picking and choosing who's at your table in those circumstances, so any advice of, it's your fault, get out of that game, doesn't work. It really doesn't. Secondly, there are plenty of places in the world that are bereft of other players. There are lone gamers who would love to have people around that they could play with. They just don't. There's nobody around who has exactly the same taste, but there might be some other players. There may be people around they can get a game with, but they might not have that perfect chemistry that you're looking for. And perhaps they're not interested in changing their ways either. Maybe they want to play a style and they're united and you have nobody else. Now, yes, I know to some level that's ameliorated by the fact that we have the internet, like you're looking at me now, and that we have Roll20, we have Discord, we have Fantasy Grounds, we have Forge, we have options. There are ways of playing with other people. And if you particularly like one particular game, then maybe you have something like D&D Beyond, if any of the others have anything like that. Sure, there are ways of going out there and trying to find those people who fit better. But not everybody has that option. And again, there are sometimes situations where you won't be able to cherry pick the people around you. So saying it's just your fault doesn't solve the problem. This is my solutions. These are advice and they're not 100%. This is just what's worked for me in the past, and hopefully it's good advice that works for you as well. Number one, understand your players. Throw out a few sample encounters in a pickup game or a con game to try to understand what your players' inclinations are going to be if they're strangers and you don't know them. That way you get a bead on what they're interested in, And listen, always be listening. Open up communication to understand what they're looking for. What do the people who come to your table really want? You should be interested in that. And, of course, it might not match what your specialty is, what you like, what you're longing for. I've encountered this numerous times, both in games that I've played and ran, where there's incompatibilities, and I understand it. Now, in the case of a pickup game or a con game, you don't have to worry about long-term ramifications. You're not going to be there for very long. You just have to provide an entertaining game for these people that fate has dealt to you. In that case, yeah, feel free to change things as you go, just to get through the scenario and give everybody a good time. If you're not having an absolutely brilliant time, at least it'll allow you to look at a different perspective and maybe try to shore up some of the areas you might be weak. So if, for example, people are, murder hoboing at your table and you're used to a good narrative style and you've come up with a rich series of, role-playing challenges and puzzles and intellectual, say a murder mystery. That's always a terrible one to have murder hobos in. Say you've unlocked this mystery. Now the players coming new, because you advertised what the game was, hopefully, that's how you do your session 0, hopefully they know what you wanted. So if they determine that the way they're going to solve a mystery is by killing everyone, then they will get the bad ending. In a murder mystery, you should probably have a bad ending. The wrong person gets fingered, or they just don't solve it. That does sometimes happen. But the bad ending happens, especially if they've killed everyone. Otherwise, one of the worst things that you can do with a murder hobo is to say, well, you attack, but that person's not hit. You can't seem to hurt them. That just makes them mad. That just gets them going. Let them kill people. Just let them have their way. As a matter of fact, bring in more people for them to kill. If they've determined that, say, the priest of the village, who is a harmless bystander in reality, is the villain, have them go in and let them go in and violently murder him if they're going to. You're the killer! Rawr! And they come out with weapons. And the priest is like, I'm not the killer. Well, they've, in some people's eyes, have completely ruined this game by going off and killing an innocent. But quite honestly, if the party craves combat, give them a combat. And maybe you can even teach a lesson through the combat. If, as they go to attack him, suddenly angelic beings appear that would try to defend this poor, harmless, innocent priest, and will go straight at the party and combat, meeting them where they are, then the party gets a fight. They might start questioning, hey, why are we fighting angels, though? If this guy's a murderer, that shouldn't be. Maybe they'll think about it. Maybe. Don't guarantee it, but maybe they will. And that's a way that you can kind of try to enforce the narrative. Have the world have consequences to what they do, and if they're going to meet things with combat, the world will meet them with combat to a certain extent. And if not, if they just decide they want to, the first person they're like, okay, we suspect him, we're going to go after him, and they decide they're going to solve with violence, change it on the fly if you want to. Hey, okay, fine. Hey, guess what? You were right. How did you guess? You guys are brilliant. But, of course, if he's the evil guy, he's going to have a backup plan, including expecting these adventurers to attack him. So all of a sudden, his guard henchmen and minions show up. Now we can have a great fight, and you can use your game mastery skills to have him escape. And now they can chase him down and have that kind of a story dictated by the party. And you can go along with it, and yes, it's going to suck if you really had this great story you couldn't wait to unfold before them, and you wanted to narrate all this. It sucks. I hear you. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a one-shot, and that is how you can get through it. By still giving the player something they can talk about afterwards, and just pulling the objective just out of their grasp so that when they finally kill the guy, it's more satisfying, it has some meaning, and you string it along to the duration that you wanted to run the game to, or were obligated to run the game out to. Nothing sucks worse than the party just completely bollocksing everything up after an hour in a 4-hour game, and you're just like, sorry, you've killed everybody, I can't do anything with this. That's Yeah, that is on them to a certain extent, of course, objectively, but really you're not there to be objective. You're there to give everybody a good time. Hopefully yourself, but sometimes you have to sacrifice what you want on the altar of giving everyone else a good time. And if your playstyle is that incompatible in that circumstance, well, just give them what they want and move on. Be flexible. Allow yourself that latitude. Now, that only works, and that advice is for the bigger picture. Now, if you are in an area that is thriving, that is full of gamers of all stripes, and I'll have to admit, I have the luxury of being in an area that has a very vibrant young community of gamers just looking to play games. They just love having a person around to teach them. And this freaking quarantine is throwing such a monkey wrench into my plans, I can't even tell you. It's a little frustrating. It's a lot frustrating, actually. So I am blessed that if I want to play my kind of game, I got people that I can get, but not everybody does, and I understand that. But if you have that luxury and you can cherry pick just the perfect people at your table who match your style, no matter what it is, hey, you're in a great position, and you don't need this video. You didn't need Robert's video because you're not frustrated because you can get the right people. Cool, no problems there. And if you're blessed, so blessed, that your friends who are gamers also share your style, no worries. You're in the best of all circumstances. You can run the games that you want, your players will lap that up and enjoy it, and you'll all have a great time telling great stories. It's great. It's wonderful. When that happens, that is awesome. That doesn't happen all the time. It gets complicated when your players are your friends, especially if you find the tastes have changed. If their tastes have changed and they are craving something that you're not really ready to give as a game master, that can be pretty heartbreaking because they've kind of earned the right to be at your table to an extent. They've supported you, they've played with you, you've told great stories together. And dissolving that because you're not feeling satisfied, you're not feeling fulfilled is tough. I've got no solution for that. I mean, it's feelings and friendship, and that's always a worm wrangle trying to sort that out. It really is, and believe me, I appreciate that. You have to come to your own conclusion at that point as to what's more important, your satisfaction as a game master, and sometimes how often you get to see those guys who and gals who you consider to be your friends. It sucks. It really can. Groups dissolving for one reason or another happens all the time. When somebody has to move away, it sucks. When somebody gets mad at somebody else in the group and it tears the group apart, that really sucks because that's much less arbitrary and personal. It's but when it's just because your tastes just don't seem to match, if it's early on in the existence of the group and they're acquaintances but not friends, it's much easier to say, okay, we've kind of gone through this probationary period. Look, I love this style. You want to solve everything through violence. I've got a real disconnect here because this isn't working for me. I'm not enjoying this. Your methods are kind of antithetical to how I want to run the game. That's a conversation that you can have, and maybe the players will change. Maybe they'll tell you that they won't, and they'll look on for another group, and you can get out of it with a minimum of pain and consequences. But when it comes to people who have been your friends for a while, yeah, I feel for Robert there because he made this channel because his own players weren't giving him what he wanted, and he was frustrated. Hence, Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. I hear you. I'm there. But you gotta understand where your players are at, you understand what you want, and try to stride that balance however you can. Compromise sometimes can be achieved if you can give them some of the encounters they crave, take some of the encounters you crave for yourself, try for the best. That does work sometimes. But I find generally players can be trained, even older players. And there's a few ways of doing that. First of all, with murder hoboing, number one is give them something to be attached to. If they insist that their players have no parents, no siblings, no friends, they trudge through life alone, have somebody show them some kindness. Don't just look at them as a scary, dangerous psychopath. Have somebody genuinely come up and, maybe a vulnerable person who comes up and says, hey, could you do something for me? Or I'd like to give you this. and be nice. Maybe it's a shopkeeper who cuts them in on a deal because they know that's their interest. Maybe it's a child who the parent died, the child like attaches himself. Try to do something to create some sympathy. Try to create some bonds. Even if the player fights it to some extent. Now, if the player does, like, oh, you want to come with me? Thwack! Kills the kid. Well, then it's time for your world to have consequences. Murder hobos really don't work in a world with real consequences. Sorry, but it's true. Murder hobos who go through and they most violently kill people, you know how hard it is to get away with murder these days? I mean, realistically, if you kill somebody, unless you do a fantastic job of hiding the body and staying above suspicion, you know, the legal system is pretty good at finding that out. And if you just are a murder hobo, then you don't care if you're seen. You just solve problems with violence. If anybody sees you committing a murder, even if they're guilty of something, you just committed murder, and in a civilized society, that can't be allowed to happen. You can't solve problems with violence to the point of killing people. While heroes may get a wink at a few things, outright murder, that's not excusable. You kill somebody, like, the shopkeeper, I want this. Well, that's 4,000 gold. I have 2,000 gold. It's right there, though. Thwack! You're either going to jail or you're getting executed. And if you think you can hide the body in a world where there's magic and people are going to wonder where the shopkeeper was and why his store got looted, they're going to have a vested interest. The nobles are going to have a vested interest in finding out who did that and punishing them so that they can let all the other shopkeepers know, hey, we're interested in protecting you and your wares. You can still have valuable things, and you know, our life can continue on because this person got punished and is made an example of. After a player loses a couple of characters due to being hung, beheaded, or just thrown in jail and written out of the story, hopefully they learn, and if they don't, then as far as I'm concerned, they've committed suicide repeatedly, and sorry, you don't want to play. You want to just kill things. So you're not a player, you're just a problem. And that you solve just like any problem. You just say, if you're not willing to change your ways, then you're going to have to go. And then you don't have to feel bad about it. Even if they're a friend, if they're not playing your game and they're just sticking a thumb in your eye because they can, well, sorry, but you're the problem, and you've made it very clear you're not interested in working with us, so you got to go. And if the whole group does that, wow, you're a rogue military force. You're bandits now. You're not heroes. You're bandits. And, sorry, the good guys have armies, they have heroes of their own, it won't take long to get bounties on your head. Make your world have consequences. Cuts down on the murder hoboing drastically. And if they do some murder hoboing and bad things happen and they ignore that and their next character acts the same way, they aren't willing to learn, you can go and have that conversation. Sorry, you can't play well with others. And you need to go. Now, if the whole group is full of murder hobos. Maybe it was fun when you were in college to go through and, well, we've got this dungeon. We've slaughtered everything. We have Waterdeep, the jewel of the north, and we've killed everybody. I don't know if that's even possible, but sure, let's go with that. Our characters got so powerful we killed everybody in the town. We eventually flooded it, and everyone is dead, and we took all of the treasure, and we're ha 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 ha. That was great. And they make the next characters. Boy, I can't wait to destroy Waterdeep again. But as a DM, you've moved on. You've got a story. You've got this great story called Dragon Heist that you want to run, and it's like they're already planning on how to kill everybody, and you've got a story. Well, Session 0 should help you out with that. Tell them, hey, you know how we used to do things? Let's not do that as much. Yeah, you'll find that your job will be a lot easier if you make alliances and have friends. And quite honestly, your characters aren't 36th level, deity level characters. You guys are first level characters, and while you may have these plans and things, the campaign is never going to get high enough to the point where you can kill everybody. There's always going to be other 20th level people around. There's going to be ancient gold dragons. There's going to be other things that if you're going to turn into soulless abominations, the world is going to stop you. It's happened before, and it will happen in this game if you do that. So instead, let's go with your people. Just in a world that has laws, it has rules, and if you obey those laws and rules, you can prosper. You can do well for yourself. If you insist on running things the old way, you're going to have problems. And then demonstrate those problems. You have infinite resources of the rest of the world as a game master. Hopefully you can deal with that. I have heard of game masters who had their players walk all over them because they got too powerful to... No, you're effectively God. No, you're never completely at the whim of the player characters. There's always somebody bigger and somebody cooler. And if there's not, it's time to end the game. Your characters are the gods of that realm. New realm, let's try something else. How it goes. But this is an attempt to get a reasonable appeal. If your whole group can't be reasoned with, they're stuck in their ways and they will not change after everything you've tried, you've demonstrated that it's not the best way to go. You've tried to give them bonds and they keep slipping out of the bonds and don't want anything to do with being attached to anything or caring. If they're your friends, maybe you just simplify your game. I'm not saying it's an ideal circumstance, I'm not. And it can lead to a lot of frustration for you. But if you basically take your game and turn it into a board game, you can satisfy their bloodlust and allow them to go through it and look for something else to do with them. Something that you can kind of steer them into, say, an army situation where, yeah, I've got plenty of enemies for you to kill. And just go at it there. And occasionally I can reward you because you've done atrocious things, but they're all bad people. So if you're going to murder hobo, I will give you a battlefield, a sword, and let you go to work. You can do that for a little while. There are some games that really actually work fine for that because your characters are detached. I'm thinking Warhammer's Only War. Your characters are Imperial Guard. You aren't on your home world. You have no attachments except for the guard themselves, and you're scared out of your mind most of the time because you're being thrown against some of the most horrific things in the universe. Perfect for murder hobos. There you go. They want you to be solving problems with violence. Lots of it, aimed at the enemy. So as a result, maybe that's a game that you shift to that'll allow them to exercise their more murder hoboing ways rather than the richly detailed narrative that you really optimally would like to do. But here's the thing. If you have that situation and they're your friends and you still want to play with them, one thought is preserve the group, but maybe cut down the amount of time you play and fill that time that you otherwise would be playing. Maybe find another group that meets your needs, maybe online. It's a possibility. That way you still don't cut your ties, but you still maintain your friendships, and you still have the itch scratched of actually playing with a group who lives close to you, and you get to see your friends, you still get to do the things, but it's a compromise situation. It's not perhaps as optimal as you'd like, but you aren't losing your friendships, and you're still getting to do the thing. If they oppose going to a less option, just tell them you need to take time out for yourself. Be honest. Honesty is almost always the best solution, and open communication is almost always the best way. And, you know, if you want to, you can even say, look, your style is exhausting me. I just need to do something else other than play the game you like to play every so often. And, you know, that's a situation that I myself am contemplating doing. So this is somewhat personal for me. But this is just something that you can do to not lose everything, to not say that it's my fault for just playing with you people. I don't believe that's really a good cookie cutter solution that applies to everybody or even to most people. Yeah, if you are in an abusive situation where it's actually painful for you to play, yeah, by all means, get out of that mess. Absolutely. But if you're in a situation and it's a styles clash, and you've tried everything, you've tried teaching them other ways, you've tried explaining logically your world and your situation, and they're just not jiving with it, then maybe it is time to step back a bit. But again, I wouldn't say completely, cut the cord if you're playing with your friends. If you are, playing with relatively newcomers, it's a lot easier. Have a probationary period and be honest about it. Tell people what you're looking for, rather than just they belly up to the table and, okay, let's meet the new game master. No. They should have some clue of what's in it, what's going forward. And if, again, you have a veteran group who just doesn't mesh with you anymore, well, see what you can do. See what compromises you can pull out. And if it is you that is the problem in any situation, maybe you're the murder hobo. Maybe they want a rich narrative story and you want bloodshed and dungeon delving and lack of commitment. They're constantly pressing you to give them, pay attention to my background. I've got all of this stuff here, and you don't want to do any of that. For some people, that's a lesser thing, but it's just a difference in playing style and wants and needs. So, sometimes flex a little bit. See if you can try to appreciate the beauty of their perspective. It is a valid way of playing in somebody's perspective. See if you can make it yours for a time. That's my suggestion, and obviously there's no right and wrong. Your situation is unique to you, and I just think it deserves a more nuanced response than just get out of a situation where your style clashes with your players. Hopefully some of these different points can help, and hopefully with a minimum of hurt feelings you can find the group that matches your needs, and maybe they're already there with you. Just a little communication and possibly a little bit of consequence in your world, making it a more rich and full place. Maybe your players will finally find a place in your world and want to play the style that you like to play. No miracles, but hopefully a little hard work, you can get something good. So anyhow, I'm OmnusI. Thank you very much. This has been a video response. Again, compliments go out to Confessions of a Frustrated Game Master. This is a difficult topic to tackle. So again, a little clever thought, a little work, but I think we can get there. So thank you very much, and I'll see you the next time I see one of these videos that needs a video response. Thank you, and farewell.